Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Budget Audio File. Today I want to talk about the Kbear, or as they are passionately known, Kbear KS2, which is this IEM right here. And yeah, I want to share my opinion about it just a little bit. Now, in terms of technical specifications, we are dealing with a hybrid system here. We have one DD and one BA, so one balanced armature and one dynamic driver. It comes with this cable, these tips. That is all you get in the box. The cable is, it's fairly usable. It's not the nicest cable I've seen, but for the price, it's definitely alright. The tips come in 4 sizes. You're gonna find something which fits your ears, hopefully. And in terms of pricing, this IEM comes in around 25 bucks on Amazon Prime, or 25 euro if you live in Europe like me. And if you seek for it on AliExpress, you can find it for around 18 USD. Probably even cheaper if it goes on sale. Now, in terms of tonality, overall, the TLDR, what can we say about the KS2? What can I say about the KS2? Well, this is an IEM which is meant for bass heads. Alright, let's get that out of the way. This is an IEM which is the furthest thing away from neutral, but that's not a bad thing, right? If you happen to be looking for a basshead IEM around the price of 20 bucks, then this is probably something which you should think about. Now let's talk about the reasons why. Now to get started, the bass, being a basshead IEM as it is, it has about, I would say, 12 dB of boost compared relative to the mids. And that is a massive boost. That's a lot of bass. But here's the thing with the KS2. Even though there is a lot of boost, the quality of the bass is actually really surprising. What you sometimes get with budget IEMs that have a lot of bass, such as the what you sometimes get is just a hollow thump in terms of mid bass. You don't really get texture, you don't get quality, you don't get nuances of the bass. The bass isn't layered, there's not a lot of detail. It's just a hollow thump. That is not the case with the KS2. The KS2 has excellent detail in the mid bass as well as in the sub bass. So if you do have a song which has maybe 808s, sorry about that, my audio cut out. So, as I was saying, if you do have a song with 808s which extend all the way to 20 Hz, you are gonna hear every last bit of rumble. And the rumble is quite good on this one. It's, again, there's a fair amount of detail in the sub bass as there's in the mid bass. So, all in all, for bass reproduction, the KS2, Kbear KS2, definitely gets my recommendation. Alright, so if that's the only thing you care about, you might as well just quit the video now and get this. Now, moving on to the mids. The mids on the KS2 are fairly average. That isn't to say that they are bad, but they also don't really excel at anything. And they have one problem, which is due to the fact that the KS2 has so much bass, mid-bass emphasis, there is a tendency to have some mid-bass bleed into the mids. Now, in the case of the KS2, this isn't a huge problem. It's not always notable, but on some songs you will, on certain songs, such as, for example, Billie Eilish, Bad Guy, there's supposed to be a central vocal track at the beginning of the song, right? Like when the music starts, and the KS2 has so much mid bass, so much bass bleed, that the central vocal track, which is supposed to be there, quite simply gets obscured, and you cannot hear what's going on. Apart from that, apart from vocals, electric guitars have, if you listen to a lot of metal, where guitars tend to play in fairly low frequencies, there's going to be a similar problem, I would say, where the massive presence of sub bass tends to make electric guitars riffs sound a little bit unbalanced. because the low end is going to be much fatter than anything which is in the mids. So imagine if you're playing a chord which ranges all the way, which has like 4 strings, right? All the stuff on the lowest string is going to be much more elevated than the stuff on the 4th string, right? In terms of percussion, for example, the KS2 is fairly good. I think detail retrieval is fairly acceptable for the price. It's nothing special again, but we gotta keep in mind here that the KS2 is not a mid-centric headphone at all, IEM at all. This is an IEM aimed at bass heads, and I would say that for that market of bass enthusiasts among the sci-fi crowd, the mids here are more than serviceable. They're pretty damn good. Alright, so let's move on to the treble. Now, the treble is the only area where I would say that the KS2 maybe has a slight problem, which is actually quite fairly noticeable. What I've noticed is that the KS2 has a tendency to, well, not a tendency, the way the KS2 reproduces treble is that the treble tends to sound a little bit crushed and compressed. Now, you can really test this on songs which have a lot of cymbal work, and optimally cymbal work in a song which has a lot of other stuff going on at the same time, right? And in such songs, one example is Xenochrist by The Faceless, right? In that song, you clearly hear the KS2 struggling with maintaining resolution and clarity in the treble. It isn't the worst case of compressed treble, which I have heard, and it's still serviceable, but this is definitely the one area in which I could see Kbear or Kbear improve future models. Maybe try to tune the drivers, the IEMs, so that there's a bit more resolution in the treble, right? So we talked about some of the issues with the treble. All in all, what I really want to say here is that I'm criticizing the treble of the KS2 from the standpoint of stuff that is much more expensive, alright? In terms of being a 20 USD IEM, this is still very good performance, alright? A couple of years ago, people would have paid hundreds for this kind of performance that you get right here. That is how much the audio market has changed, especially for IEMs in these last 2 or 3 years, I would say. Now, after having talked about the treble, I want to talk about soundstage for a little bit, even though there's really not much to say here. The KS2 has similar soundstage to pretty much every IEM which I have personally listened to. That is to say, the soundstage goes from your left ear to your right ear, doesn't have a lot of height, and it's pretty much in your head. That is just the nature of IEMs. It's not a problem with the KS2, it's just the way IEMs are. They're not open back headphones, so you can't really expect to get a ton of stage unless you maybe make the decision to invest thousands of dollars into an IEM, which I'm not willing to do so. Imaging is quite good on the KS2. I would say above average. There's good image clarity. You can fairly position stuff fairly well in the song. Well, never mind. But in most songs, imaging is fairly good on the KS2. So definitely no problems on that front. Now, before I end this video, I wanted to make a little comparison, because the KS2 comes in around 20 euro, 20 USD, and for a long time now, about a year, there's been somewhat of a top dog in terms of fairly bassy 20-30 buck IEMs, and the one to beat until now has been this. This is the quasi-legendary Blon BL03 with a Yin silver cable, which I can actually recommend for the KS2 as well. If you want a cable which just feels much nicer, then go ahead and get yourself a Yin cable. They're really good. I've had this one for about a year and never had any problems. Now, in terms of sonic quality, how do these two compare? First off, the tonality or frequency response of these two is a little bit different. The Blon BL03 has less bass, less treble, and as a result, the mids are not as recessed as they can be on the KS2, and it sounds less fatiguing. In terms of pure tonality, if you're just talking frequency response, I prefer the BL03. It doesn't make me feel as fatigued as the KS2 because this has fairly boosted treble and bass, which is a tiring combination, if I might say so. Now, let's talk about the technical details, the specifications of each important part of these, how these IEMs sound. The bass, even though it's much more boosted on the KS2, is definitely better. This has more detail in the bass, has better rumble, better dynamics, which means more slam, more punch. And in that area, the Blon simply can't keep up with the KS2. In terms of the mids, I would say I probably prefer the Blon a little bit, just because the mids aren't quite as recessed on the Blon BL03, and in my opinion have just a little bit less grain than the KS2 might have. So that's one area where the Blon takes the cake, still continues to take the cake. And in terms of treble, the Blon is also the winner. Alright, so the thing which I talked about with the KS2, where it kind of has crushed sounding treble, compressed treble, splashy, some people call it, it's not present with the Blon BL03. Alright, it really isn't. And that's probably the best. This is the area where the Blon BL03 excels the most compared to the KS2. Now, having said that, I will say that all throughout the frequency range, what I noticed is that the KS2 just tends to have better detail and better separation than the BL03. And once you apply a EQ to this one, I would typically do a negative bass shelf of about 5 decibels. Then you can actually do it for both and then just compare which one is more resolving, more detailed. And once you apply the EQ, it just becomes so clear that the KS2, in terms of detail separation, and just how well defined and nuanced things are, no matter where they are in the frequency range, except for the treble, the KS2 is just a better performer in this regard. So, does this mean that the Blon finally got dethroned as the king of the sub 30 USD market for bassy IEMs? I wouldn't go that far, but I would definitely say if you are someone who is either all about the bass or willing to EQ, then the KS2 might be a better choice for you. If you are someone who just who doesn't focus on bass that much and just wants something which is easy to listen to, not fatiguing, and which you probably won't have to EQ ever, the Blon is probably still the pick of the year for me. Yeah, but either of these are pretty good values. And what excites me the most about the Kbear KS2 is that they've managed to provide this quality of driver. I mean, this is some really good stuff in there, good detail and just good performance overall for this price. This one is about 18 euro or USD if you order from China. This one's about 25, I believe. So not only have they undercut the Blon BL03 in terms of pricing by about 25%, but they have in terms of technical performance, it is outdoing the BL03, and I really can't wait to see what this company Kbear is going to come up with in the future. If this is any indication of what they can do, what they are capable of, there's going to be a lot of good stuff coming from this company in the near future, I'm sure. So, exciting prospect for anyone who is interested, anyone who is into budget audio, sci-fi, value-oriented audio. I really look forward to seeing what this company is going to come up with in the future. Alright, so that's about it. That's my thoughts on the Kbear KS2. All in all, if you're looking for something, this is definitely recommended. Thanks for watching and see ya.